It's very clear that this is the same old SDTC, despite claims about changes. This NDP Liberal government's corrupt green slush fund, loaded with conflict of interest. It hasn't changed because it's still being administered by a board using exactly the same model. And the NRC can't answer questions about basic conflict of interest issues that are ongoing. Now, the constant theme that we have at this committee on various issues here, public accounts, is that when things go wrong, the ministers apparently have nothing to do with it. They always want to describe themselves, and Liberal members want to describe ministers as mere passengers on the ship of state. I'm sorry to see that likely at the industry file, we have yet another Liberal minister that seems to be more focused on leadership campaign preparations than on governing. I want to ask specifically, Minister Champagne has said, as Mr. Brock talked about, that there would be enhanced monitoring during the interim period and changes to contribution agreements. When the minister said that, was he telling the truth?
Mr. Chair, I think the previous testimony taken here about the interim period and the monitoring, the review of the files, the AG's observations and those being accepted by the department and SDTC are important. They're there on the record to establish how things will proceed.
Just answer the question. I mean, was the minister, who you report to as well ultimately, was the minister telling the truth when he said they were putting in place changes to contribution agreements and enhanced monitoring? Was Minister Champagne telling the truth? Yes or no?
So, Mr. Chair, the minister's actions are there on the record in terms of suspension of funding, putting in place a new interim board and a process to review the recommendations that have been made, particularly the Auditor General's report, and take appropriate action on that, and then subsequently to have it transferred to us.
I'll stop you there. I mean, I asked you the question twice, and you can't tell me clearly that the minister that you report to was telling the truth, which suggests he wasn't. And hopefully we'll have him before this committee so that he can give an answer directly to that, because he made some claims about changes at SDTC that just don't seem to have actually been made at all. Now, I want to ask about bonuses. Have bonuses been paid to executives, directors, managers that have been working on this green slush fund? Are people that are working on this receiving bonuses?
So, Mr. Chair, I'm not in a position to address bonuses of SDTC or its employees. I think those questions have to be addressed to the organization itself to provide an answer for the members.
Okay, but so you're supposed to be taking over administration of it. So should those bonuses be paid? Will you recommend that they not be paid? What's your position on that going forward?
So, Mr. Chair, I think the employment of SDTC employees is subject to their arrangements with the foundation. At the point in time they become NRC employees, then it'll fall under our regime for compensation, and that's a completely separate employer, and obviously we'll count for what we're doing with those employees once they join our organization.
Should they receive bonuses, though?
Mr. Chair, I have no views to share with the committee in terms of the work of SDTC employees and bonuses. That's something you should address to the organization itself.
Okay, I mean, with you taking it over, I would have hoped for a little more on that. But final line of questioning here: would ministers or Liberal political staffers be able to invest in companies that benefit from this green slush fund? Would any have investments? Would any be able to receive those investments?
So, Mr. Chair, without speculating, I think the question is really any of these people that have been mentioned in the question is what conflict of interest procedures apply to their own roles, and I think you'd have to address that to those individuals and in the circumstances. Certainly nothing I can give an account to.
Sorry to jump in, but NRC is going to be responsible for giving out this money. So what conflict of interest procedures would apply to dispensing those funds?
Mr. Chair, as I said, the conflict of interest policy of the National Research Council will apply to any program that comes under our care. And certainly in this case, it will apply to the Sustainable Development Technology Programming funding that we will have care of once we've had it transferred.
Have rules that would prevent this kind of conflict of interest, that would prevent political staffers, ministers who own companies from having those companies benefit? Do your rules prevent that? I think it's a simple, clear question, and I'm not getting an answer. Can you give a clear answer? Would your existing policies allow staffers, ministers to benefit? Yes or no?
Mr. Chair, the conflict of interest policy of the NRC and our administration of funds is taken place by professionals. They'll direct funds where there's eligibility and benefits for Canadians, and with the application of our conflict of interest policy to their activities. And we take those decisions within the National Research Council.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. That is...
Chair, I'd like to raise a point of order.
I'll hear a point of order. Yes, Mr. Genuis.
Thank you, Chair. I think I pretty clearly and repeatedly asked the question that the witness pretty clearly refused to answer despite multiple attempts. I'd like to ask you to put the question to the witness and ask him to inform him of his obligations as a witness. I didn't ask if they had a conflict of interest policy. I asked what the policy is, and witnesses have an obligation to answer clear questions, especially when repeatedly asked over and over again in a clear form.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. I have a point of order as well from Ms. KHALID.
On that same point of order, Chair, I don't think that is a point of order at all, and I don't think that that we can force an answer from witnesses.
Well, I do have that ability. Having said that, Mr. Davies is here. He's answering questions. We might not like the answers. I think his non-answers speak for themselves. You will have one other round, the official opposition. You're welcome to press it again. I am going to move on.
And I wanted to maybe just zero in on a quick sort of summary of the Green Slush Fund scandal that we're adjudicating today at the Public Accounts Committee. So you have a fund that is giving money to companies ostensibly related to green technology, but you have in reality board members handing out this money, giving it to companies that they own. You have a group of well-connected insiders who have been placed on this board who are saying, okay, let's give a bit of money to Bob's company over here, Bill's company over there. Oh, my company could use some money too. That is the essence of this scandal. In some cases, you had directors stepping out of the room for those votes that benefited their companies. But in some cases, you also had individuals voting on disbursements that directly benefited companies they own. And it's crazy to me and to many Canadians that this sort of thing could happen. But on the other hand, it is part of a pattern of corruption we're seeing under this government over the last 9 years. And the testimony we're hearing today is to suggest that maybe there's been some changes in the way this program operates. But what I'm getting here is that things have not changed substantially, that we are facing the same problems, the same potential problems of corruption and self-dealing. So I want to drill down on that. You have an interim board right now at the Green Slush Fund that is making decisions about where these disbursements go. Do any members of the current interim board have personal investments in companies that have received money, that could receive money in the future, that are seeking money? Do any current members of that interim board have those kinds of investments?
Mr. Chair, it's not a question I'm in any position to address directly. You have to address that to the individuals involved.
I'm sorry, you can't answer that. We're here adjudicating the question of conflict of interest of board members, and I'm asking you, do any of the current members of the interim board have issues of conflict of interest? Well, why can't you answer that, sir?
So, Mr. Chair, the interim board in no way reports to NRC, doesn't fall under any jurisdiction. We have our policy for conflict of interest. Obviously, the appointment process used for those interim board members is what applies to their appointments and any work that was done to review matters of conflict of interest. So I can't speak to it directly from the NRC.
So it's been 9 years. You have board members that are benefiting directly from decisions of the board, sometimes stepping out of the room when those are voted on, sometimes not. And we have, at present, a board where there may or may not be continuing issues of conflict of interest. That underlines the fact that despite all the discussion around this scandal, the government has not fundamentally changed what's happening. Now, the proposed future transition to these decisions being under the auspices of the National Research Council. This committee has studied the problem of public servants themselves owning companies or being involved in companies that have been benefited from government contracts. So can you tell us, sir, with respect to this future proposed transition to the National Research Council, do any National Resource Council employees, NRC, National Research Council employees, have investments in companies that receive funding through this slush fund, or that could receive that funding?
So, Mr. Chair, in regards to conflict of interest of our employees, it's explicitly clear that they are not to have investments in companies in which with whom they're working. And absolutely that's reviewed when they join us, and it's reviewed on an ongoing basis. And it's quite critical, obviously, given the matter of a real conflict of interest that would put them in if they were to do so. Let alone any involvement in the past that could have a concern around perceived conflict of interest.
Thank you. In the time I have left, do any ministers, political staff, PCO staff, PMO staff, anybody who could be involved in directing NRC's decisions, would any of them be able to have investments in companies that benefit from disbursements through this Green Slush Fund?
Mr. Chair, I think, as far as how I can answer it is the administration of program at the National Research Council is conducted by our staff, and it's under their professional judgment in the system.
But I think the public would still like to know, and just a yes or no, would PCO employees, political staff in the minister's office, ministers, PMO employees be able to have these kinds of investments benefiting from the slush fund?
Mr. Chair, I can't really speak
yes
to any
no.
given employees that are not under my care or responsibility in their offices, but they don't have anything to do with our administration and decision-making on investments we make of public funds.
Thank you. Mr. Genuis, that is the time. You will have an opportunity again to revisit this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was flabbergasted by some of Ms. KHALID's opening comments. She described our inquiries in this regard as being like a fishing expedition. If this is like fishing, it's like going to a barrel full of fish and grabbing fish out of it. It's evident that the volume of corruption, there's no question that there were violations of basic norms around conflict of interest here. So using idioms that suggest this is sort of speculative investigation is pretty outrageous, and seems like the member is trying to deny some of the basic conclusions of the Auditor General's report.